Hello everyone, I'm Professor Plank. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. It's time once again to dip our toes into that vast, never-ending wellspring that is the YouTube Shorts section to find a series of smaller tidbits of Creationist cringe. Because whether you're talking about YouTube Shorts or TikTok, Facebook Stories, Instagram Reels, or any of the other vid-sharing platforms that specialize in videos under a minute, there are more and more people dumping their thoughts into tiny little tidbits and chucking them online for the crowds with dwindling attention spans to consume. And when you try to condense thousands of years of philosophy and religion down to a handful of seconds, it doesn't exactly lend itself to anything that one would consider depth of thought. But that doesn't mean we can't address the ideology and perspectives behind such videos with a bit more in-depth analysis and responses. And at the very least, even when the shorts in question are batshit crazy, we can at least find some humor and entertainment in shining a little light on it for a moment. So let's reach into the theistic grab bag and see what pearls we can pull in another round of Creationist cringe. But before we get to that, if you end up liking what you see in this video and would like to help out the channel, make sure to subscribe, click the bell so you'll always be notified when new content comes out. Check out my social media, including my Patreon and Twitter, all linked in the description. And of course, like this video, pop in a comment, all that goes a long way towards pleasing the YouTube algorithm, which is truly pleased when we shine a light on these insane little nuggets of theistic tripe, because if it has to watch this crap, you have to watch it too. May it keep my channel motoring along. Now on to today's video.
Christian apologist Sean McDowell recently asked his Twitter followers the following question. If you are an atheist or agnostic, is there anything about the world that gives you pause and makes you wonder if there is a God? If so, what is it? A common response was fine-tuning. Well, what is the fine-tuning argument? 1. If a fact that we observe stands in need of explanation, and hypothesis H provides a satisfactory explanation of E better than any alternative explanation available, then E provides significant evidential support for H. 2. That our universe is hospitable to life stands in need of explanation. 3. That God adjusted the constants in order to allow for life to develop provides a satisfactory explanation for why our universe is life-permitting. 4. There is no comparably satisfying explanation of this fact available. 5. Therefore, that our universe is life-permitting provides significant evidential support for theism.
Alright, let's dive into these premises and see where they go wrong, because they go really wrong really fast. So, the first one. If a fact, E, that we observe stands in need of explanation, and hypothesis H provides a satisfactory explanation of E that is better than any alternative explanation available, then E provides significant evidential support for H. This is wrong in every possible way. For starters, no observed phenomena or occurrence, quote-unquote, needs an explanation. Things happen the way they happen. Things do what they do. That you want an explanation has no bearing on the way the universe works. And it will continue to work in exactly that way regardless of whether or not you receive any explanation. And so it's perfectly fine to say, I don't know, to any question about any fact that we observe, and to withhold adherence to an explanation until any proposed explanation can be conclusively proven. This insistence on an explanation right here, right now, and just go with the best explanation we have, is a fool's errand. Because it may be the case that we do not have the capability of properly, accurately explaining various phenomena. It may be that we can't explain it at present, and it may be that we'll never be able to explain it. But our inability to properly, accurately explain something is no reason to glom onto a false explanation just because it gives us some explanation, and some explanation is better than none. Secondly, the term satisfactory explanation is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Satisfactory according to whom? You know, I cite the example of the universe being the product of universe-belching unicorns from the 8th dimension a lot. And yes, I do it facetiously and for comedic effect, but it also makes a real point. The idea that the universe was created by universe-belching unicorns from the 8th dimension would be considered an unsatisfactory answer to practically every religious apologist. And why? What about it isn't satisfactory? Well, it just seems silly, doesn't it? Like fantasy nonsense, claiming some kind of omnipotent magic that doesn't really explain anything, right? Well, yeah, just like any theistic God claim. Universe-belching unicorns from the 8th dimension is no more ridiculous and lacking in real explanatory power as the idea of a disembodied spirit outside of time and space, but with all power to affect anything and everything within time and space, poofing all of time and space into existence out of nothing. The fact that you find your God explanation satisfactory makes it no more valid than anyone who finds it satisfactory to believe that universe-belching unicorns belch the universe into being. Thirdly, what do you mean when you say hypothesis H is better than any alternative explanation available? Better by what metric? Because any theistic God claim is absent of any real explanatory power. If one were to entertain the idea of a creator God and asked for an explanation of how that God created the whole universe out of nothing, and I mean get actually real specific about what happened and why exactly it happened, and the answer boils down to, well, he did it with his godly powers. And God's ways are above ours, and so we can't possibly understand how it works. Then you haven't actually given an explanation for fact E. You've abandoned trying to explain it and just chalked it up to, effectively, magic. Unexplainable magic. In what way is that a better explanation than, well, anything else? Frankly, having no explanation at all, ever, for as long as we live, but always striving to discover a real, understandable explanation, is a much better position than abandoning any notion of a rational explanation and just going, oh, must be magic. That is not a better explanation. Then we move on to premise 2, that our universe is hospitable to life stands in need of explanation. No, it doesn't. Again, nothing needs explanation. You want an explanation. The universe will continue to function in exactly the same way, and nothing will change about it whether you receive an explanation or not. Furthermore, our universe is not hospitable to life in any sense of the word. 99.9% repeating of the universe will instantly kill all life as we know it, should that life ever find itself there. There are comparatively tiny pockets of life-sustaining areas within the universe where life can exist, harsh as those environments may be. And the fact that tiny, tiny little areas are capable of supporting life in this vast, expansive universe, vast enough, large enough that practically any and all physical conditions are basically inevitable to happen somewhere, is not surprising in the least. And then, lo and behold, life exists in those tiny little areas where life can exist. Shocker, I know, but just crazy enough to be entirely natural. Then we have premise 3, that God adjusted the constants in order to allow for life to develop provides a satisfactory explanation for why our universe is life-permitting. No, it doesn't. As I already went over, any theistic God claim is not even an explanation. It's supplying the idea of unexplainable magic in place of an explanation. You can just call your unexplainable magic God and somehow think that that counts as an explanation. Well, it doesn't. You know, whenever I'm talking to or spending time with someone who believes in God, which is most of the time, as most everyone I know is a theist of some kind, and they ask a rhetorical question, I tend to use this tactic. If they're having a hard day and, for instance, say something like, "Why is all this crap landing on me today?" I flippantly respond, "Probably something you did to anger God." Or when we go to the store and find the one item that we came there for is sold out while everything else seems to be fully in stock, and they say, "Why are they sold out of the one thing that I wanted?" I retort with, "Because that's the way God wants it." Or if they get their paycheck on Friday and then their bank account is already at a negative balance by Sunday, and they say, how is that even possible? I always come back with,
well, first of all, through God, all things are possible, so jot that down.
none of those God answers are satisfactory answers to those questions, because they aren't even attempts to answer the question. They're abandoning any attempt to find actual answers and supplanting a thought-terminating cliche of reducing any causal factor down to magic. God did it explains nothing. Then we have premise 4. There's no comparably satisfying explanation for this fact available. Well, hit it, Neil.
The universe is under no obligation to make sense to you.
Your inability to find a proper and accurate explanation is no reason to default to an unproven and illogical explanation just so that you can have some explanation. The idea that any explanation, no matter how ludicrous, is better than no explanation at all is how theistic-minded people believed for centuries that the sun was a god riding a chariot of fire across the sky, rather than it being a ball of gas undergoing nuclear fusion 93 million miles away, and it appearing to move across the sky was because our planet was spinning and the sun's position relative to our planet was stationary. They didn't have the capability of understanding the truth of the matter, and so they defaulted to a fantasy, magical explanation. We'd call them silly for doing this today, yet you're doing the exact same thing. Then we have the conclusion. Therefore, that our universe is life-permitting provides significant evidential support for theism. Well, given the significant flaws of every single one of your premises, your conclusion is as faulty can be. And this same line of argumentation can be used for any fanciful nonsense. Here, let's have a go at it. Premise 1. If a fact, E, that we observe stands in need of explanation, and hypothesis H provides a satisfactory explanation of E that is better than any alternative explanation available, then E provides significant evidential support for H. That's exactly, word for word, your starting premise. Now let's change things up a bit with premise 2. What exists on the exact opposite side of the universe from us stands in need of explanation. Premise 3. That a planet of felt-skinned, Muppet-like creatures who dance around spitting candy corn and singing death metal music provides a satisfactory explanation for what is on the exact opposite side of the universe. Premise 4. There are no comparably satisfying explanations for this fact available. Conclusion. Therefore, that there's no competing explanation provides strong evidentiary support for Muppet planetism. This is how people get to the point of believing absolute nonsense. When you make it seem like your fantasy BS is the result of logical reasoning, you can get people to believe in anything in absence of real, actual explanations for things. Alright, so let's leave that behind and move on. What else do we have?
If historic Orthodox Christianity were true, would you become a Christian?
Define Christian. Like
Following Jesus' commands and trusting in him for your salvation.
Yeah. I would say it would. I would need more information. I would become.
If it were true.
Yeah. I'm saying then it would depend on what his commands are, whether I agreed with them.
For those who are like, you're an atheist skeptic, you're just a non-Christian, you're kind of on the fence. That's the question I have for you today is, if Christianity is true and you knew it, would you commit your whole life to Christ? Would you truly worship and follow Jesus Christ, trusting in him, loving him, obeying him? And if your answer is, then there's a spiritual heart issue you're dealing with. And that has to be overcome. That has to be dealt with. Or you won't be able to see clearly, because we're committed, before we hear the answer, we're committed to our conclusion that we're not going to follow.
Shut the up, Mike!
So yeah, you might have started off thinking that was a Frank Turek video, but ha! Tricked ya! Pulled the old bait and switch and it ended up being Mike Winger. And no, I did not stitch two different videos together. That was Mike's video. He just used a Turek video for the first half of his, and really for no significant benefit. He could have just started his short with his part and cut out the Turek stuff completely, and it would have made the exact same point. But anyway, If Christianity were to be proven 100% true, would you become a Christian and commit your whole life to Christ? Would you worship, love, trust, and obey Christ? And then he says, if your answer is, then you have a spiritual heart issue. Well, no, Mike. My answer would not be, My answer would be an emphatic no. Because knowing that Christianity is true is no indication that one ought to worship, love, trust, or obey Christ. I mean, why? Because if I don't, I'll get sent to hell? Well, that's an appeal to consequence fallacy, which is concluding that an idea or proposition is true or false because the consequences of it being true or false are desirable or undesirable. The fallacy lies in the fact that the desirability is not related to the truth value of the idea or proposition. So if the proposition is that Christianity is good and right and ought be followed because you'll go to hell if you don't, well, that's no reason to conclude that Christianity is good or right or ought be followed. Why should I worship Christ just because Christianity is true? If I view Christianity, and thus Christ, as morally wrong and unjust in my estimation, why should I worship an immoral and unjust deity? Why should I love a deity that I view as immoral and unjust? Why should I trust an immoral and unjust deity who is on record in the Bible as lying when it suits him to do so? God lied to Adam and Eve when he told them that they would die if they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but they ate from it and they didn't die. God lied when he told Abraham to kill Isaac, but then called it off at the last second. Why should I trust a God with a record of lying? And why should I obey dictates that I estimate to be immoral and unjust from that God? Why should I do any of those things just because I know Christianity to be true? See, this is the idea behind divine command theory. The notion that anything that God does or commands is automatically morally right, good, and true for just no other reason than that God does it or commands it. Even if I did believe in the Christian God, I wouldn't hold to that notion. And if I cannot rationalize many of the aspects of Christianity with my notions of right and wrong, then all that gets me to is believing in an all-powerful moral monster. And if you take away the fear of hell consequence fallacy, then why ought I worship, love, trust, or obey a moral monster? Frankly, if I'm committed to the idea of doing good, then I should reject that moral monster regardless of its status as an all-powerful deity or what it might do to me because of my rejection. Rejection of Christianity, even if Christianity were true and we knew it, is not a spiritual heart problem. It's a moral fortitude problem. Basically, your God doesn't live up to my moral standard, and I'm unwilling to compromise my morality for your deity. But luckily, I don't believe that your deity exists in the first place, so all of this is largely a moot point.
Yeah, it's like a cow's opinion. It just doesn't matter. It's moo.
As soon as you think, if I was to truly follow Christ in my life, I would have to do, and you fill in the blank. Whatever's in that blank, that you need to cut off. That you need to make a decision about. That's the thing that's keeping you ultimately from following Christ. You know the things that are keeping you from following God. You know the stuff. It comes naturally. And if you aren't aware, if you feel like you're blind to it, pray, God, open my eyes. You know, God's alive and real and interacts with you, even responds to prayer. So call out to him.
Shut the up, Mike!
What would I put in that blank? Well, if I were to truly follow Christ, I would have to abandon reason, logic, and any semblance of an epistemological standard for believing in unproven assertions. I would have to believe in fanciful stories based on no evidence and little more than wishful thinking and a desire for them to be correct. I would have to elevate that one unproven assertion, theistic concept, above all other unproven asserted theistic concepts for no more reason than because the Christian theistic concept is the culturally dominant one in the part of the world where I live. I would have to abandon major aspects of my moral and ethical framework in order to adhere to dogma that was established by Bronze Age bigots thousands of years ago on the assumption that it was divinely inspired, when I don't actually believe that any of it was. And anyone who knows the slightest bit about how psychology works knows that we don't actually choose what we are and are not convinced of. So I would basically have to lie to myself and tell myself that I believed in something that I really don't. And all of those things that Mike quickly flashed on the screen that he assumes are the things that are keeping atheists from God, all that drinking, gluttony, sexual activity, wrath, anger, rudeness, and the like, the whole "you're just an atheist because you want to sin" trope. We've all heard it 1,000 times. No, Mike, if I really wanted to do those things and get away with it, I should be a Christian. A faith that is awash with people who will sin all week long and then go get saved on Sunday. A religion that can't go a single day without news hitting the wire about another pastor or faith leader being found to be a sex predator, usually engaging in CSA. A faith that gets you off guilt-free for nothing more than admitting it to God, saying you're sorry, and promising to never ever do it again. But hey, if you do, just come back and go through this whole charade again all over next week, and it's more carte blanche forgiveness. Rather than the atheistic position, whereby the guilt you feel over harming or wronging others is something that comes from within and can't just be washed away through magic divine grace, but actually requires radical notions like, apologizing to the person you actually wronged rather than just thinking an apology to your imaginary friend. Or making restitution for the harm that you caused rather than just saying a few Our Fathers and Hail Marys that don't do any good for anyone. The idea that quote-unquote sin is in any way lessened by being part of Christianity is a laughable assumption that is obliterated by any serious look at the way the world actually works, and can be exemplified by just looking at the rates of religiosity among the prison population. I'm not shying away from Christianity because I want to debauch myself. I'm shying away from any concept of God because, well, him not real.
There are many reasons why atheism has fallen on hard times. Let me give you 5. First, atheism struggles to objectively ground moral values and duties. Second, atheism fails to offer its adherents a sense of ultimate meaning and purpose in life. Third, atheism as a worldview is unequipped to lead people to a morally transformed life. Think about it. How many testimonies have you heard from atheists saying, "Man, let me tell you how not believing in God has morally transformed my life." Fourth, the naturalistic worldview that the universe popped into existence out of nothing seems absurdly far-fetched to those who oppose a naturalistic explanation for the universe. Fifth, atheism fails to offer hope beyond the grave. Fortunately, unlike the atheist, the Christian can ground morality, discover God's purpose, experience moral transformation, know that God created the universe, all while anticipating hope beyond the grave.
Atheism has fallen on hard times? Was I sleeping too long? When did this happen? Well, maybe we can go to the numbers and see if maybe I missed something. Let's see. Nope, that all looks good. No, religion's practically in free fall, especially Christianity. What about... Nope, the nuns are continuing to be on the rise. Yeah, I have no bloody idea what Eric is talking about here. Seems to be a lot of Christian cope, if you ask me. Just keep insisting that your side's winning while people leave your churches in droves. And the hilarity of seeing Christian conservatives saying they will just outbreed the atheists by having a lot more kids, never seeming to realize that most of atheists' growing numbers are from people raised Christian abandoning their faith before they hit 30. But as far as the reasons why atheism is supposedly on the decline in Eric's mind, let's go over some of those. His first was that atheism struggles to objectively ground moral values and duties. No, it doesn't. Atheism doesn't even attempt to do this, so there's no struggle. Atheism says nothing at all about morality, values, or duties. Atheism is just not believing in God. But secular efforts to ground moral values and duties doesn't really struggle either, because any such secular attempts recognize that there's no such thing as objective morality. And grounding moral values and duties in subjective morality is as easy as it can be. I think my values and duties are moral. Boom, done. Subjective morality achieved. Second, atheism fails to offer its adherents a sense of ultimate meaning and purpose in life. Again, atheism doesn't even attempt to do this. Atheism is just not believing in a God. You derive your own meaning and purpose for yourself. And for many, I would even say, for most people, this is a far superior way of establishing meaning than having it imposed by someone else, even if that someone else is a supposed God. Or worse yet, it being imposed by people in control of a religion claiming to speak on behalf of a God that is apparently incapable of speaking for himself. But as I've said many times before, everyone chooses their own meaning and purpose for themselves. The only difference between the theist and the atheist in this regard is that the atheist is honest enough to admit that they're choosing their own meaning for themselves, and the theist insists that it's coming from God. It's just that, shock of all shocks, that God-imposed meaning and purpose just happens to line up exactly with what the theist wants to do with their own lives. Oh, you want to be a husband and a father of several kids who works at, say, a law firm and raises his kids up in the church? Well, blow me down. That's exactly what God wants you to do with your life. What, you want to become a pastor and have lots of people hanging off your every word and giving you practically unquestioned moral authority in their minds and in shaping their perspectives? Well, slap me, Sally. That's exactly what God wants for your life. We all choose our own purpose and meaning. Get over yourself. Eric's third point, atheism is a worldview and is unequipped to lead people to a morally transformed life. Well, for one, atheism isn't a worldview, so this is a total non-starter. Also, this is really just a rehashing of the first point about atheism not offering moral values or duties. You can't just reword the same point multiple times and offer it as some kind of a new argument. But furthermore, on the idea of no one saying that not believing in God or becoming an atheist made them a morally better person, I'll call bullshit. I know I became a significantly more empathetic and moral person when I stopped believing in God. When I stopped assuming that a big man upstairs had everything under control and would sort everything out somehow, and I started realizing that the only way to fix problems in this world was for us to step up and do the hard work of fixing things ourselves, I became a more generous, more caring, and more conscientious person, thinking more about other people's feelings. How many people of faith don't give a rip about solving climate change because the rapture is coming soon anyway? How many Christians don't seem all that interested in the harm or hatred or persecution of non-Christian communities or countries because, hey, they're all filthy heathens anyway? And maybe that persecution or suffering is God's just wrath. Maybe it's just what they need to suffer through in order for them to turn away from their heathen religions. I mean, seriously, you say how many people saying not believing in God have made them morally better people? Practically everyone I've ever talked to who's come out of religion. Then the fourth thing, the naturalistic worldview that the universe popped into existence from nothing seems far-fetched. Well, the naturalistic worldview of the beginning of the universe would probably be the Big Bang model. And, the Big Bang was not the explosion of the universe out of nothing. It is the expansion of the current presentation of our universe from an initial state of high density and temperature. There is nothing in the Big Bang model. There's nothing in naturalistic cosmology or any materialist worldview that ever states that the universe popped into existence from nothing. That is Christians' favorite straw man, even more so than their other favorite straw man about atheists just wanting to sin. This is bullshit, Eric, and you know it. I'd say you're better than this, but we both know that you aren't. And then fifth, atheism fails to offer hope beyond the grave. And while this is kinda true in that there's no afterlife in atheism, it's also not even necessary, as evident in the declining rates of belief in heaven or hell among Americans. But given the Christian notion that far more people go to hell than go to heaven, something exemplified by the mere fact that Christians hold that no one can go to heaven who isn't a Christian, and most of the world's population are not Christians, then all of the various Christian denominations that claim to be the only true Christians, and that all the others are false Christians, thus they won't go to heaven either, it seems that practically no one, except a very select few who have guessed the correct specific religion, get to go to heaven. And everyone else gets to burn in hell forever. So actually, atheism does offer some hope after death. The hope that no matter what, you're not going to burn in hell. So, yeah, Eric, you had some bullshit, some strawmans, and some non sequitur claims about atheism struggling with things that atheism doesn't even deal with. And all based around the utter lie that atheism is failing, falling, or somehow dwindling, when all the data shows that it's growing faster than it ever has before, while your religion specifically is in freefall. Well, one more before we bounce. What else you got for me, Algorithmo?
Hey y'all, just some thoughts from a dumb redneck. Take height, width, depth, and time of the universe times infinity, okay? Because those are all infinite. Now, multiply that by a chance of evolution of a god, even a tiny, tiny chance, and you get millions of gods. I think atheism is stupid.
It's the brain pain, Coach.
What? Let's see. He said, take height, width, depth, and time of the universe times infinity because those are all infinite. No, none of those things are infinite. The universe itself is not infinite as far as we know, so the 3 spatial dimensions of the universe therefore also aren't infinite. And time certainly is not infinite. It began 13.7 billion years ago. But you take those things times the evolution of a god. How would you quantify evolution of a god? And what do you mean by evolution in the first place? Like biological evolution? Are you saying that the god you believe in evolved to his godlike state? Did that god used to be a mortal being? Is this some kind of a Mormon thing, where they think God used to be a human and was a good Mormon and so got to be a god of his own universe? Or do you mean evolution as in, like, the evolution of mankind's idea of God? Which would be more like superstitions changing and separating over time, and that's how we got all the thousands of different God concepts that we have today. And you then even say that we have tons of different God concepts now. Well, even worse, you said we have millions of gods. So, yeah, tons and tons of different God concepts that we came up with the same way we came up with the tons and tons of illogical, nonsensical superstitions and fairy tales. We came up with them through cultural evolution. And then, without explaining how you go from that notion to your one specific notion of the presumably one God that you believe in, you just conclude that atheism is stupid. I mean, how can you argue with impeccable logic like that? Anyway, I think that's where we're going to wrap it up. We had some really poor attempts at rationalizing a belief in God with crummy, flawed premises. We had assuming that if God were real, that it would automatically necessitate worshiping of that God, regardless of how immoral it was. Insistence that atheists just want to sin. Insistence that atheism is dying out and struggling to do things it doesn't even try to do, and then a broken string of consciousness rambling about how atheism is stupid because there are apparently millions and millions of gods in this infinite universe that isn't infinite. You'll forgive me if I'm not chomping at the bit to rush out and join the first Christian congregation I can find. I realize that when we look to the short-form videos for rational argumentation for theism, you can't expect anything well fleshed out. I mean, obviously it takes more than a handful of seconds to make cogent philosophical arguments. But it would at least behoove theists to keep those handful of seconds free of blatant lies and logical fallacies so glaringly obvious, it's a wonder even the apologist could get through saying them without busting out laughing. In the end, you'll excuse me if I remain unconvinced. And so that is where we'll end things for today. So thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe so you'll always be notified when a new video comes out. Don't forget to check me out on Twitter and Patreon if you'd like to support my work directly. My Teespring if you want some Plinky merchandise, all that linked below in the description. Special shout out to my most recent super thankers here on YouTube, Salvi Mike, Atheism666, and Gareth McKee 5927. Until next time, I'm Professor Plink reminding you to keep striving for greater understanding. It's the best way to get wherever you want to go.